Hi again then guys, and welcome to another instalment of Beards and Cars, the more informal series where we just talk about this, that and the other. It could be related to Gran Turismo or Forza or games or movies or YouTube in general. And in this particular instalment there were two overall things which I wanted to touch on. First of all, as the title of the video indicates, Gran Turismo Sport, in particular the rumour slash news slash whatever you want to call it regarding Phase 2 of the beta program and whether or not you think that's going to happen, and if it does, what are the implications thereof. But also, as a totally different topic, if I get around to it in this video, I wanted to discuss aspects of something which we have touched on before, something which is more interactive with you guys, although the GT Sport stuff is as well, and that is what kind of motorsport you're into, if any. Likelihood is, if you're on this channel, you probably like cars. That pretty much goes without saying. You must be pretty bored if you don't. And what kind of racing you like, what kind of race cars would be maybe your favourites if you had to pick one in each category. That's something which I wanted to talk about a bit. As I said, we have touched on stuff like that before. And also, before we get into either of those things, I wanted to, again, ask you guys what kind of topics you would like to see me discuss with you in the comments, in the next Beards and Cars, in a Beards and Cars down the line. Something, it could be anything, literally anything. It doesn't have to be about Gran Turismo, it doesn't have to be about YouTube even, it could be movies, it could be about something about me, something about life, something about gaming, something about movies, something about YouTube, something about cars, whatever, pretty much any subject you can think of that you would like to discuss or get a viewpoint on. Obviously, like a review, that kind of thing. Now, first of all, of course, we want to talk about the elephant in the room, which is Gran Turismo Sport. Now, Gran Turismo Sport, as I touched on in my relatively brief news video yesterday regarding the Phase 2 of the beta, is supposed to be, I think, if I remember the date correctly, around a month away. Middle of October, basically. I was going to pre-order it. I've been asked by a lot of people which version I was planning to pre-order. I said that I was planning to pre-order the, I think it's the Ultimate Collector's Edition. I'm not sure exactly what the title is. I'm also getting that equivalent version of Forza 7. Funnily enough, both games come with a little model car as well. Not that that's really relevant, but it's an interesting thing to throw in. And one of the reasons why I'm getting that is not just because it's the best, because as far as I'm concerned, I don't need the best version. As an example, I don't own a PS4 Pro, for instance. I don't own the newer version of the Xbox One, which, is that out yet? I think it is. But whatever, I don't care about owning the absolute best of everything. The reason why I'm buying those is because of the advantages which they give you on opening day, or in the case of Forza, before opening day, because it gets delivered before the game is officially released. Now, the reason why I'm doing that isn't just to be there before everyone else, but at the same time it kind of is, because of course this is a business. That's what this YouTube channel is, and having those extra days and also starting the game with extra perks like money, credits, whatever, is a big advantage to have. It means that I can get into doing the videos which you guys want to see quicker, because otherwise if I buy a game I can't be doing tune setups even within the first few days, really, perhaps even the first week, because you've got to have enough money to buy the cars and then tune the cars. And if we know anything about the Gran Turismo franchise, it's that tuning cars is not cheap. Even on Gran Turismo 6, you're looking to spend around, say, 150, 200,000 credits, depending on if you buy NOS or not, that kind of stuff, on every single car. Now, that is a lot of cash. And even with the cash that you start the game with, I think it's like 7 million credits that you start the game with, something like that. I am interested to see, and I suspect that it's not the case, but I am interested to see if anything will be carried over from the beta to the full game, for those who played the beta. I don't expect that they are going to do that, but it would be cool if they did, because that's one of the reasons why I kept driving every day and winning the new cars even when I started getting duplicates, just in case they do. Because if they carry over all of those cars, I could sell a ton of them, or give some of them to players, if that's allowed. That would be like a Gran Turismo 5 feature returning, but I'm not sure about that. Then that could be a big advantage. if it doesn't work out that way, then I haven't lost anything for it apart from a little bit of time. So we'll see. But as far as this Phase 2 rumour, it's obviously not an official statement yet. It kind of was, but not anymore. They've taken it down for whatever reasons. Maybe that wasn't supposed to be released at all, or maybe it was supposed to be released later and somebody put it out too early. That's also entirely possible. That tends to happen more in the movie world, where things get talked about too early or too late, or things get leaked. So it's possible that that could have happened, but relatively unlikely given that it was on multiple regions of the PlayStation blog, not just America or Japan or Europe, or Asia I should say, but on all of them, and then it was systematically taken down. So let's talk about what implications that has, and also what you guys' thoughts are on it, of course, down in the comments. As far as I'm concerned, I do think that they are probably still planning to do another phase. The fact that they put that message out at all indicates that they were serious enough into doing that, or had serious enough plans to do that, that they would announce it. You don't announce something if you're not ready to some degree to do it. So the fact that they put that out at all indicates that they, at the very least, have a strong intent to do so. Now, I don't think you just suddenly go back on that intent, because that would mean potentially shutting down a whole second phase of the beta, because you don't announce something if it's not at least close to ready. Then again, this is Polyphony, and they are kind of notorious for doing that, so who knows. Now, if the Phase 2 of the beta does go forward, there are some interesting implications of that. The primary one, of course, which worries most people, is what does this mean for the release date of the game? Because as I mentioned in, again, the video yesterday, it's already been pushed off for over a year. This game was supposed to come out last year this time, roughly, October, November, I think, that kind of time. I went up to London for that press event. They were talking about the hype, trying to get everybody excited for it, and now we're a year later and it still isn't out. That's not too surprising for Polyphony and for Gran Turismo. That kind of happens a bit, but it'll be interesting to see if they'll still hit that deadline in a month, because to have a beta so close to release date is very strange. Even if people did play it and did give feedback, what kind of changes could realistically be made in that time? Because if you think about it, if they're sending it out in around a month, they have to start shipping en masse at some point. Now, I don't know the gaming industry well enough to know how far ahead they start shipping, but unless it's like an update patch that comes immediately with the release of the game, it's going to be difficult to have every game updated to whatever changes they make from a Phase 2 of the beta. Now, maybe the beta is actually more of a demo. That would make sense. If it was mistakenly called a beta and what they meant to say was a demo or a prologue, well, a demo, let's say, not a prologue, that would make sense, because we don't have a demo. Often games will have a demo, and that would make sense for getting more people hyped for the game, to give them that opportunity to play it. But there's no guarantee. That's pure speculation. Of course, I have nothing to base that on. It's probably not that, but that would make sense, at least if it was. Now, the other implications of it are interesting, because let's say it does go forward, let's say there is a Phase 2, and let's say that they do push the date off a little bit, maybe a few more months. That wouldn't surprise me at all. Of course, it would disappoint me to some degree, but it wouldn't surprise me. It would actually make the month of October easier for me, because I'd be able to focus on Forza 7 more. But I'm not disappointed at all if both games do come out. And the other beneficial implication is that if the game does get pushed off, and the beta does come out, and they give maybe more opportunity to people, or just opportunities to different people. Maybe if you entered the first beta, you can't enter the second one, or maybe they just keep a note of your name and don't give it to you the second time, something like that. Then at least that does give more people the opportunity to play the game without actually forking out all of the money to buy it, because the collector's edition is an expensive game. I mean, the collector's edition, or the ultimate edition of Forza 7, is like £80, which is like $100 basically. Gran Turismo Sports ultimate version is a lot more. I think if memory serves, that was like 105, 110, 115 pounds, something like that, which that's like 130 bucks, 140 bucks, something like that. That is a massive amount of money for one game. You could buy like a console for that like 10 years ago, like a PS2 basically. But the implication of allowing more players to get their hands on the game without actually buying the full thing, in effect being an unofficial demo, is cool. That could be cool if that happens. Now, of course, as I said just now, all of this is speculation, and it is interesting that they took down the message, because there are two primary reasons why you would take down a message like that. The primary reason is that it was a mistake, and they didn't want to put that message out. That message, who knows, may have been planned months ago. Maybe the message was supposed to be released months ago for a Phase 2, and then that would make sense. Maybe the message was shelved and then accidentally released. That would make a lot of sense. But the second primary thing is that it is planned for now, which is unfortunate, as we just said, but the second eventuality is that it is planned for now, but they didn't want to announce it just yet. Now, of the two, I think the first one is actually more likely, and I would be more happy if it was the first one, because that would make sense on all counts. Because the two things that make the least sense are, why would you delete the message, and why would you have Phase 2 of a beta so close to release date? That theory answers both of those questions very satisfactorily, because if it was supposed to be released months ago, that would make total sense, because the beta would have still been months away and the message would have been just not used. So I hope that that's the case. That would also explain why they'd remove it quickly. Now, why they wouldn't remove it from all of them at the same time is a little bit of a grey area, but we can hope. Either way, though, we'll get the game eventually. That's not exactly something which I like saying, but it's something which, with Polyphony, isn't too surprising. They kind of have a reputation for missing deadlines. At the end of the day, they're not the biggest of companies, but still, if you're going to make a game, you'd think you wouldn't keep making that same mistake. Don't announce you're going to release it until you know you're going to, not when you hope to. And too often it seems that they're releasing it or announcing release when they hope to, rather than when they know they can. Because missing it by a whole year, that's a pretty big misstep. A really massive one, in fact. So we'll have to see in the broad scheme of things. I hope that what I said as option number one is the case. I hope it was just wrong timing rather than something that's still going to happen, but we'll see. Now, the second thing, as I said, is more about motorsport in general. I think this is something which we've kind of touched on in the past, if not in this series, also in the Q&A series, which I did a while back. It's probably over a year ago now, in fact. But I get asked a lot, do I watch motorsports? Do I watch F1? Do I like WRC? Do I watch this? Do I watch that? And to be honest, although I love cars, I don't love motorsport. I actually find a lot of motorsport pretty boring, because I love cars for their diversity. When you get a bunch of cars on the track which are really similar, sometimes so much so that they're not the same, but they might as well be. Something like the Formula 1. They do technically have differences between them, but they're so similar that they might as well be the same car. It's more down to the driver, almost, than it is the car. That's, of course, not true, but that's the way it can often come across. With other racing series, though, there is a bit more variation. GT stuff, for instance, like the cars that you can see in this video from GT Sport. These cars are very predominantly featured on Gran Turismo Sport. In fact, so far we've seen more of these cars than any of the prototypes. It seems that they're really pushing that Blancpain GT3, GT2 style of racing, which is fair enough. It's a very popular class, and I have a reasonable level of interest in that. I still don't watch it, but I like some of the cars. The racing that I have the most interest in, as far as track racing, is the Le Mans, by far, because it has such a rich history, and the cars that have been featured have been so varied over the years. If you compare, for instance, Grand Prix cars from the 50s to Grand Prix cars from today, of course the technology is better in every way, but the essential concept is actually fairly similar to how it started. small, lightweight, open wheel, single cockpit, purely focused on being as fast as possible. Whereas with the Le Mans, if you compare a race car in the Le Mans from the 50s to now, they're entirely different. Because in like the 40s, 50s, 60s, kind of the 70s, but not as much, there was such a wide variety of cars and also of race winners. Because nowadays you're looking at top-tier diesel and hybrid prototypes winning, whereas back in like the 50s and 60s, you're looking at stuff like Daytona Cobras being at the front of the pack, and GT40s, and also some prototypes as well, like the Ferrari P3, but it was much more eclectic back then. You had cars from all over the place trying radically different technologies. You had cars like the Cadillac Il Mostro, you had stuff like the Chrysler Patriot concept LMP car from the 90s with a gas turbine engine. Unfortunately, it never raced. You had stuff like the Rover gas turbine cars from way, way back, the big Bentleys from the early days of the Le Mans, the Bugattis as well with their heated rivalry with Bentley. And then you had stuff which was like extreme versions of normal cars. Stuff like your Porsche 911 RSRs, which of course I did a replica of, an ultra lightweight, extremely powerful 2-litre version of the Porsche 911, which again was very dominant. Then in the 90s, look how much it varied even in the 90s. Nowadays, they're getting so similar. It's all about the LMPs now, basically. Whereas in the 90s, 1995, for instance, you had a Skyline racing against a McLaren F1. That's how varied even specific classes were. The Skyline GT1s performed extremely well. They were beaten by the McLarens, but of course they were. That's not surprising. Then as you get into like the late 90s, you're looking more LMP 900s. You got the BMW V12 LMR with its incredible naturally aspirated big capacity V12 engine, which won in 1999. In the early 90s, you've got the Formula One derived Peugeot 905, which won twice. You've got the Mazda 787B, still the only Japanese car to ever win the Le Mans. I believe that's still correct. I haven't checked the results of the last couple of years of the Le Mans that I can remember, but I don't think they've won. I think it's been Porsche, right? I think. But whatever. I'm pretty sure the 787B is still the only one to win in that category, at least. Again, incredible technology, and I've discussed some of the tech which I love from that as well. Stuff that was banned, stuff that was phased out, like long tails. I adore Le Mans prototypes, and also Group C cars, of course, which is stuff like the 787B and the 905, the Mercedes Sauber, 254 miles per hour back in 1989. You've got that Peugeot, I think it's the P88, which is technically the fastest Le Mans car ever. Also, I believe 254, 255 miles per hour. I don't know why that one gets the record over the Mercedes. Maybe the Mercedes wasn't officially clocked, but I'm pretty sure the Sauber C9 got up to that kind of speed. And then even stuff like my personal favourite Le Mans prototype, or Group C prototype ever, the Nissan 092CP. I adore that car. It's the most powerful Group C car ever made. Even around Fuji, which doesn't exactly have the longest of straights. It's long, but it ain't Le Mans long. It got up around 249 miles per hour. They are insane cars. But with all of that, you then look just 20 years earlier to the late 60s, and you're looking at Daytona Cobras and GT40s that couldn't be any more different to those cars. They really are polar opposites, and I adore that. I love the race itself. I love the track. I've always loved Le Sart, and it's just a fantastic circuit. You've got that combination of deceptive corners and really, really high-speed sections. It's probably my favourite racetrack overall, I think, and I love it. As far as rallying goes, I love the Pikes Peak more than anything else. Again, I don't watch any motorsport. If I was going to watch any, it would probably be the Le Mans, but even then, I don't sit down to watch it. As far as rallying goes, I love the Pikes Peak for the exact same reason. There is so much variation, and thankfully, that has endured to this day, because even now, the Pikes Peak has so much variation. You've got people carriers going up the hill, you've got trucks, you've got motorbikes, you've got full-on Pikes Peak specials, you've got like tiny factory teams, you've got electric cars, awesome stuff going up the hill. It's unfortunate, I think, that the track is I believe, 100% tarmac now. That's kind of a shame, I think. But still, it's cool that it's changed over the years to go from dirt to tarmac and dirt to tarmac. It's cool, it changes it up a bit. Whereas, of course, something like the Le Mans isn't going to suddenly have a dirt section. That just is never going to happen. But yeah, those are my two favourites by far. I love the Le Mans, the 24-hour race, and I love the Pikes Peak. As far as specific vehicles, well, you guys know some of my favourites. I just mentioned one of them. My favourite Group C car is the Nissan R92CP. Honourable mention is the Mazda 787B because it's such an awesome car. In the LMP 900 class, which is like the late 90s, early 2000s, when when Audi started to dominate with the R8, my two favourite cars from that era, or actually three, I think three, I'm not sure, but two which I know definitely are my favourites in that category are the Chrysler Delara SP1, which didn't have a huge amount of success, if I remember correctly, but I just love the design. It's got a very big bullnose front end, a little bit like an Audi R8 LMP that's got stung in the face by a wasp. That's basically what it looks like. I love the look of that car. And the other one, which is my absolute favourite LMP 900, is I believe it's an LMP 900 if memory serves, the Cadillac LMP. I just love when companies that you would never expect to have a car like that make one. Even if it's just their name on something which somebody else like Courage made, it's still awesome to have a Cadillac LMP car. And I adore the look of that car. The third one, which I can't recall if it is an LMP 900, I think it is, but I'm not certain, is the Panoz LMP. As some of you guys know, Panoz is my #1 favourite racing team, and I love how outlandish their cars are, and I love the front mid-engine LMP car that they did, the Spider. It was a crowd pleaser. It had that typical American V8 rumble with the crazy Batmobile appearance. It's basically the next stage in the Esperante GTR1 project, if you will. And Panoz doesn't get the respect that they deserve for being such a forward-thinking company. In fact, Panoz is about as close, as far as I'm concerned, to being a modern-day Chaparral. In other words, I think Don Panoz is today's Jim Hall. For those who don't know, Jim Hall is the guy who basically ran Chaparral, and he designed a number of incredible tech, the 2J fan car, the rear wing that would move with the suspension. I can't remember which one that was, the 2D, no, not the 2D, the 2F, something like that, the 2E, I can't recall. But incredible cars. Chaparral was the first race car, I believe, ever to use a rear wing. It's crazy, the amount of forward thinking that they had and the amount of tech that they instigated, which is still coveted or at the very least used to this day, like with wings and with active aero and with, to some degree, the fan car. Ariel recently made an Ariel Atom concept with a fan suction ground effect system. That's awesome. Obviously, it's something which will be very problematic on the street because you'd be constantly flinging stones and debris into the cars behind you, whereas on a racetrack, that's not as much of an issue because the tracks tend to be smooth and kept clean. But Panoz has had that same kind of quiet, small, but very distinct innovation to them. Not only was the LMP1, up until recently with Nissan, the only front-engine prototype. Of course, Nissan, the Nismo GTR, was another one to have that. Again, innovative car, front-wheel drive as well. But also Panoz had a GTR1 in the 90s, nicknamed Sparky, which was the first prototype hybrid. Nobody talks about that, but they started it all. It was really heavy because of the battery pack, and if I remember correctly, it didn't do all that well, but they did it before anyone else. And for such a tiny company to do that, I think is awesome. So yeah, Panoz is my favourite team by far. As far as my favourite modern team or car, I don't think I really have one anymore. I'm not a huge fan of Audi. I respect them, but I'm not a huge fan of any of their models, really. Peugeot is pretty plucky, but again, I don't love their cars. Porsche, I couldn't care less about. I know a lot of people go out of their minds for Porsche. There are some Porsches that I like. The Carrera GT is by far my favourite. But the 919, yeah, it's okay. It's a cool car. It won, good for them. But I don't really care overall. I don't really care as much about modern LMPs, to be honest. Anything after basically the year 2004, and I started to lose interest because they started becoming so similar. But the advantage of that is stuff like the Delta Wing, again, designed originally by Panos, and there was actually a lot of trouble between Panos and Nissan over the rights of the car, because Don Panos and his team designed the Delta Wing, then they used a Nissan engine powering it, and then Nissan tried to produce a Delta Wing road car, which I believe they're still trying to. They did the concept, but without acknowledging Panos, as if Nissan had come up with it, and they hadn't, and Don Panos was taking them to court over that. I can't recall if that's sorted out yet or not. I hope it does get sorted, and I hope it gets sorted in favour of Don Panos, of course. But yeah, stuff like that, the intrigue, the innovation, it just goes so much more to a creative level, I think, than Formula One does. Because with Formula One, it's such petty drama, like, oh, he didn't get out of his way when he was supposed to. He didn't pit in when the team told him to. Who cares? It's just so boring to me. Formula One is like the equivalent of like Premier League football to me. It's just a bunch of guys paid way too much for doing what loads of other guys do anyway, just because that happens to be the one that is the popular sport, because the public is told to believe that it's the popular one. Whereas in the Le Mans, the drivers don't get paid as much, but they drive faster cars for a longer time and involves more endurance. So that's just the way I see it. I know a lot of people love the Formula One. I can understand why. It's got more of a gladiator kind of feel to it, with driver v driver, team v team. And even in the Formula One, there are cars and teams which I have liked. I've talked about those before at length. Probably 3 Formula One cars or Grand Prix cars which I love the most are the Brabham, the BT46B with the fan system. Absolutely dominant race car, one of the most dominant race cars ever made. One race, it won it by 30 seconds with Lauda at the wheel, immediately banned, surprise, surprise. Another one which I love is the Williams FW15C with the CVT gearbox, driven by Coulthard in the 90s. It was consistently a second faster every lap because it never had to change gear. There's video footage of that one on YouTube, it sounds incredible. And the third one, which I don't like as much, I like it more because of its significance, is the Benetton B186, which is simply the most powerful F1 car ever made. 1.5 litre BMW engine, 1500 horsepower in qualifying, or no, 1400 horsepower I believe it was in qualifying form. It was either 14 or 15, I can't recall, but insane power from a 1.5 litre engine. I don't think it was great through the corners, but on the straights it was a monster. So yeah, those are some of the outstanding ones for me. So of course I'd love to hear down in the comments, and doubtless some of you guys have already written by the time you hear this, what kind of motorsports you like. Are there any in particular that you watch? What team do you support overall? Maybe in each different category if the team doesn't participate in all of them. And just quickly before we close out, as far as WRC goes, I'm a huge fan in fact of some of the WRC games, especially in the PS2 generation. And my favourite WRC team is actually Skoda. I love Skoda as a manufacturer. I love their cars. I love the fact that people constantly underestimate them. And I adore the Skoda Fabia WRC. Not the modern one, but like the 2004, 2005 shape. And one of the reasons why I like it so much is because of the WRC games. Of course, it has to fit in the regulations with the weight and the power. But because it has the weight in such a compact package with a shorter wheelbase than something like a Hyundai Accent or an Evo or an Impreza, it just feels more nimble. I love that chunky appearance that it has. I love the white and green livery. And I just like to root for a team which people don't like to root for. So that's it overall for my thoughts. As I said, I love to hear you guys' thoughts down below, both about GT Sport and about motorsports in general. And don't forget to also put stuff down there that you'd like to hear come up or discuss in future Beards and Cars. But that's it overall for this installment, and I'll see you guys next time. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.